All right, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you to everyone who said hello in the chat. I made a quick note that it defaults to just talking to us panelists. So if you want to say hello to everyone, make sure you change your to all panelists and attendees so other attendees can see you saying hello as well. My name is Danielle. I'm the CEO of Women Talk Design, and I'm so excited to have you here this evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, to join us in this chat with Paula and Ying. We had the opportunity to all talk this morning as well, and they have such great stories and advice to share. So I'm really excited that you all could be a part of it. And today's conversation is really about embracing your unique perspective. And we brought Paula and Ying here because they have really amazing perspectives in the talks that they give, both from their own backgrounds and their expertise, but also from their being bilingual speakers. And so I'll give you quick introductions to both of these speakers, and then we'll dive into our questions. I have some questions to get us started off, but we'd love to hear what you want to hear as well. So there's a Q&A option in the Zoom. I encourage you throughout the session, you can ask questions, and I'll insert questions in that are relevant to what we're talking about, or I'll save it to the end. And so I encourage you to use the chat, keep the conversation going there, and use the Q&A as well. So without further ado, very excited to introduce our speakers. First, we have Ying Liu, who's an award-winning artist, entrepreneur, and educator, and also a bilingual speaker. She has many awards from Fast Company and Microsoft, Shorty Awards, and has been featured in the New York Times, Bloomberg, Fast Company, the list goes on. You might know her as the creator of the Twitter fail whale or the dumpling emoji. And she really loves to create iconic designs and brands to help bridge linguistic barriers and unite people and enchant audiences around the world. She's spoken at events like South by Southwest, TEDx Palo Alto, and Adobe Max. And she was originally born in Shanghai, China, and educated in Sydney and London, and now lives in San Francisco. And leveraging her cross-cultural background and experience, she strives to bridges between the East and West. And really her purpose is unifying dualities between art and tech, business and culture, and beauty, meaning, life, and work. And we are so excited to have Ying here. Next, we have Paula Maraceli, who's a multidisciplinary designer with over 9 years of experience working as a product design manager. She's currently at Facebook in their new product experimentation team. And at Facebook, she's worked on a lot of different products, including Facebook Live, instant articles, Facebook videos, videos for emerging markets, and more. Prior to Facebook, Paula worked on digital products at Groupon, Credit Suite, and Additon. And she earned her master's degree in computer science from Harvard University, a bachelor's in information science and marketing from NYU, and has certificates in business analytics and project management from George Washington University. Paula was born and raised in Lima, Peru, and moved to the US when she was 15. She now lives in California with her 2 dogs and volunteers at the Peninsula Humane Society for Exotic Animals Division. So help me welcome Paula. Awesome. So excited to have both of you here. And we want to get started with just hearing about how you started speaking. And so I'd love to hear a bit about your first speaking experience, how you got that speaking engagement, and anything else you want to share about it with us.
I can get started, I guess. Hi, everyone. I'm Paola, as Danielle mentioned. And for my first speaking experience, I really jumped into the deep end because I was asked to be the speaker as an alumni for the commencement speech of one of the colleges that I attended. And that was a crazy opportunity because it was going from not doing any public speaking at all to speaking in front of over 2,400 people. So it was definitely a crazy experience, but through it, I really fell in love with the process of speaking to a large crowd, of trying to really think deeply over like what I was trying to convey, and that process of introspection, as well as that process of connecting with other people, and afterwards being able to share stories and like chat more one-on-one afterwards. So that was really like the first introduction to public speaking, and it wasn't until years later afterwards that I started speaking in terms of like for more tech topics, and that didn't come about until way later on, and that came as a result of creating opportunities for myself. So setting up the panel that I wanted to speak at myself, and to telling people that I was interested in public speaking. And then eventually my big break came when I was able to speak at MOBEX, which is a conference in Germany. And so it took a lot of work and sort of like decisive steps that public speaking was something that I wanted to do.
So yes, that was wonderful, Paula. I'd like to share my personal sort of background and story when I started. Up until now, I didn't realize because of the morning question when Danielle asked me, when was your first time doing public speaking? I thought it was 2009 when I did my Ignite talk, but as actual fact, the first time I actually faced a larger crowd was back in 2005 when I was volunteered to do live translation for a lot of professors going to Shanghai during my school break when I was going back to my hometown. That was my real first public speaking sort of opportunity, even though I was a live translator. And I was facing more than 500 students. I've never had any experience of facing such a large crowd before. And I was also translating in real time, completely frozen. It was a disastrous public speaking gig for sure. But it somehow gave me this foundation because it was such a failure that I feel like, oh wow, if I can handle that emotionally, I should be okay. So that's kind of my very first public speaking opportunity.
That sounds like a heck of a way to start. And I want to talk more about that. You know, I think that public speaking can be really scary for everyone. And I hear, especially for folks who are maybe speaking in a language that is not their first language, it can, you know, add an extra layer of anxiety or fear. And I'd just love for you to talk a little bit more about your experiences with that and how you've overcome it, or what tips that you have around that. Paula, do you want to get started?
Paula, you want to start?
Sure thing. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect. I switch headphones just in case to wired ones. See if that improves the audio. But yeah, definitely fear. It's a part of it. I think for any speaker, whether you're bilingual or not, just fear of speaking in large crowds and just the entire process, it can be very intimidating. And I think it's normal to feel a little bit scared and to put yourself out there for what you feel is going to be judgment. And so I think it's normal in general. And I think these feelings just tend to be emphasized when you're bilingual and it's not your first language. And so for me, a lot of the fear had to do, one, in terms of my accent. Whenever I'm doing public speaking, my accent is actually more amplified. It can be heard more. And that's something that I was pretty self-conscious of at the beginning, and something that I overcompensated for by overly practicing and almost sounding robotic because I practiced too much. And it's something that I just had to get used to, right? And to like be patient with myself, in that I was still learning and I was still having to practice public speaking, and also being kind with myself as I would to another friend, that having an accent is normal if you speak more than one language, if you're lucky enough to be bilingual, right? And so it's something that I had to work through. The second fear that I had was around, like, why would anybody want to listen to anything I have to say when there's someone that is out there that is much better than me, I'm sure, that could share these things. And that took me a little while to realize that I didn't have to be better than somebody else to share my experience. I could just be different. And just by being different and sharing my unique story with other people, that was enough, and that was additive to the conversation.
That was so beautiful. And I just saw my friend Mabel said, oh my God, that was so relatable. Thank you, Paula, for sharing that. I'd love to also add on in terms of how you face the fear. I did an experiment a couple of days ago. I was making my first homemade noodle. And I remember it was in the beginning, I couldn't even like get it on, because I was doing this with a lot of different friends. I think we all have fear of doing something for the first time. And one thing I realized is that I was very happy in the end. The noodle turned out to be pretty good. And the secret of that is that I have pretty low expectation for myself. And there's a difference between having high hopes or high expectation. I think often people have this high expectation of them. I must do this. I have to do this. I have to nail this talk. You know, there's so many people expecting me. And I think that this is one of the things that you have to kind of figure out the difference, which is you can have high hopes for yourself, which is aspire to be that best self you can be. But if you don't, in the end, if you don't reach to that goal, and that's okay too, because you tried. And I think often we value so much about the result and not necessarily value the process. And I think being able to step out of your comfort zone and just do the things for the first time or second time and practice over time, that process itself is very important. And it's so much more valuable than the result sometimes. So that is my little tip about facing fear, and embrace it too.
That's great. Thank you both. And on that note, Ying, about embracing the process, I'd love if you both can share a bit about your process when it comes to preparing to speak, and maybe if that's changed at all over time as well. It sounds like it's been a while since you both gave those first speaking engagements. And so how has that preparation process changed over time?
It's definitely changed, thank goodness. It doesn't take as long. I think one of the things that that I used to do was start straight on with the presentation and slides, and start there, and then it would take so much longer because I was basically trying to start the process at the end and then work backwards from there. Now what I do is write. I actually write what I want to say as if I was writing an essay, and that helps a lot with the content and also the structure and eliminating things that are like actually not needed. And then from there I move to, okay, what would a presentation would look like? What anecdotes can I insert here and there? And then at the very end, it's like the actual visuals of the presentation. So I think being patient with the process and making sure that you're giving it enough time, because at the same time, even though I was doing the process perhaps backwards early on in my public speaking journey, I feel like those steps were also needed. Like making those mistakes in the process are needed and then part of your growth, because there's not one process to public speaking. And so making those mistakes is part of your own process to figure out what will be the right process for you.
That was lovely, Paula. In my case, I'm kind of a little bit opposite. I think in picture instead of words. So if you ask me to write, I will go completely blank. I'll be like, oh my God, it's intimidating. Where do I start? It's a blank page. And often I think people also do a lot of speaking, writing, right? They do the little speech. I think it's actually helpful. For me, I think probably many of you, if you're designers, you think visually. I found this very helpful. Over the time, I realized that it is actually helpful for me to started to collect visuals I wanted to show in my talk, especially because I will be showing a lot of design work. And often I think that when I have the actual examples as visual examples and then put it in the slides, the story kind of unfolds itself, because I started to find a narrative and a pattern of what like the design thinking process or ideology behind each project. And I can started to see, oh, wow, I can start to formulate different talking points by summarize the actual project and figure out which project represent which takeaway. Because I think it is also important for us as speakers, because we're communicating ideas. It's not about what we want to say, it's about what the audience want to hear. So you have to tailor your final product. In this case, your speech is your final product according to how this could be helpful to your target audience. So we kind of design it in a way sort of it's user-centric. So you're kind of looking at, okay, this talk is going to be covering these points, And I'm going to use these examples to illustrate these points. And that's why, like in my case, I think visuals are super helpful for me to categorize my thoughts in a very, it's almost like a mind map, kind of like, you know, we all know like the ideal note stickers, you put it on the whiteboard, it's the same idea. I think when we're doing slideshow talk, I think it's the visual aid is so important. The other thing I think it's also very helpful in terms of listing out the talking points. And finally, I do find it is also helpful to practice this in front of your friends and family so that you can get the blind spot, because people often will give you some ideas or you know, new insights that you don't know because you know what you know. Well, you know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know. That's where your friends and family and other you know, audience will give you these blind spots, and that's going to help you to improve over time for sure.
Something that you said, Ying, reminded me that that it is a process, and you could use your design process for it as well. And just like when designing any other product, there's no one way for it to be successful. So whether it's post-its, slides, writing, brainstorming with your friends, however you want to craft your process, that's going to give you the successful result. That's what you need to do. And it might take some trial and error. So yeah, definitely I agree with you, Ying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one more thing I think you just reminded me is do smaller talks like Petra Kucha style, 20 slides, 20-second each, or Ignite talk, 20 slides, 15-second each. It's always so helpful when you started to do it in small steps, small chunks. It's going to be a lot of fun to do it because it's not a lot of pressure. So that's another way of the process I would recommend.
Fantastic. Thank you both. I'd love to talk a little bit about not just preparing for all of your talks, but preparing for your talks in different languages. So I know that both of you, give talks in both English and Spanish and Chinese respectively. And I want to hear more about that. Is that something that you do you generally start in one language and then translate to the other? Do you give different talks to different groups? Would love to hear about that process.
Go, Paula.
Yes, it's interesting because at different times I feel like English and Spanish are my second language because, I was born and raised in Peru. I was there until I was 15. Peru runs through my blood. But at the same time, I immigrated to a country where English is the first language, and that's where I got, all of my education, or at least like higher level education. And so in certain ways, making my presentation in English is easier than in Spanish because I don't have all the technical jargon in Spanish, so it takes a little bit more work. I found that in creating crafted presentations, I will start with the larger ideas in English. And then once I'm ready to go into like practicing to myself or recording myself the presentation and what I would say, then I start just naturally practicing in Spanish. And then as I keep going, I run into, okay, I don't know how to say product management in Spanish, or I don't know how to say design sprint in Spanish. And I need to like go search those things and slowly fill in the gaps. So it takes a little more work at times, but it's definitely doable. Something that is really fun is that you have this perspective in two different worlds and cultures. And so you're able to be that bridge for those two different cultures through the examples that you put on your presentations, and also through the words that you choose, the idioms that you choose to share. And so I think that it just opens up a world of opportunities to be able to speak on those two languages, even though it can be a little bit hard at times.
That was lovely, Paula. For me, I think that when I prepare for different audiences, I usually have like an umbrella topic. So in my case, one of my favorite topics is always cross-cultural design. But in terms of like breaking down the examples, I would actually categorize and making sure that I have universal examples. For example, I always love showing the project I did with Disney Shanghai, which people know this brand because it's an international brand and people are interested in localization in China. So that's always a very fun project because there's not a lot of linguistic barrier because it's all visual. However, for example, there's another project I always love talking about it, but the audience response will be differently if I do it in China, because it's a project about redesign a logo in Chinese character. So in China, it responds really well because people speak that language and they feel very relatable. However, if I do it, say, for example, in New York and facing a multicultural crowd, people like it, but the response is not as strong. So in this case, I kind of quickly realized the user feedback is not as positive as it should be in China. So next time when I do this with a multicultural background audience, I would choose something that is more visual, less linguistic. And so I would choose something like I did for India, for example, even though I don't speak that language and people can get the joke. And humor is such a powerful way of connecting people too. If it is a funny example and it makes people laugh, that's always helpful when you go anywhere, right? But if you're going to like a specific, specific audience, for example, I go to Australia, I would actually take some examples I did in Australia, and people are like, wow, this is something I experience like in the subway or in the airport all the time. So they feel that instant connection with your content. So that's kind of how you can localize your content and globalize your content according to where you're speaking or which demographic you're speaking.
That's so true, Ying. And that also makes me think of, in terms of humor, the fact that, oh my goodness, my dogs are being insane right now. I did mention in my biography that I have 2 dogs. And this is, when you are speaking on stage at a conference, the things that can go wrong are like you can fall off the stage, like the speakers can go off, like the actual audio or whatever, the lights. But now when you're speaking at home, it's also filled with other potential issues, like the fact that, there might be children that just will run around, or like in this case, like 2 dogs that will all of a sudden go completely insane. But anyway, in terms of humor, one off example that it reminded me of, Ying, what you were mentioning, was not necessarily when you're translating your own speech, but when you're working with a translator. I gave a speech to a group for IXDA, and it had to be translated into Mandarin real time. And whenever I try to include humor, it was very delayed and very diluted. So you'll say something that you think it's like gonna kill, right? Like super funny. And then you have to wait like 2 minutes for it to be translated, and then like nothing really happens. So that's something also to keep in mind if you're working with a translator, like how those things may or may not come across.
That was great.
That's a great point. I want to give another plug again to putting your questions in the Q&A. We want to make sure that we answer the questions that you have that you came here with and be able to share the stories and advice relevant to you. And as you all are doing that, I have some more questions for Paula and Ying. We were talking a bit about audience response, and I want to chat a little bit about feedback, because I know that this can be something that's challenging for everyone, is how to handle feedback. But again, could have this extra layer of difficulty if you're self-conscious about your accent, as Paula had mentioned, or for whatever other reason. So I'd love to hear how you handle feedback and how you choose to respond to it.
I just wrote a Medium post about it, so plug to go read it somewhere on my Twitter. It's there, and for me, I really try to separate the person and more of the emotion and the feeling of the feedback with what is the kernel of truth that I can take from the feedback. And so I started mentioning earlier in terms of my accent and feeling like over preparation might lead to it feeling robotic. That's because I received feedback that it was too robotic. And the way that it was delivered perhaps wasn't the most gentle way that it could have been delivered. And you could choose to be like, okay, that's coming from a negative place or from a negative person, and let me just completely disregard it. Or try and see, okay, maybe this is a blind spot that I have, that this piece of feedback is allowing me to see. Because at the end of the day, you can use other people as a mirror to really allow you to see from a third-party perspective what it is that you're doing as a speaker. And so what is the kernel of truth that you can take from that piece of feedback? And then that can help you make it into an actionable item for you to improve.
That was lovely, Paula. I think I would like to add an additional sort of layer of feedback. Often I think we're, as speakers or as any designers, we tend to be a perfectionist. I just saw there's a Q&A, it was asking, how do you practice the perfect pronunciation of something? There is no perfect pronunciation of something. Even if you ask an English speaker, what is a perfect pronunciation? There's American pronunciation, there's a Canadian pronunciation, there's an Australian and UK pronunciation. Your pronunciation belongs to you and you're unique, and please honor that. And this is the whole reason why we're doing this. And one thing I found it was really, really interesting from my personal experience is that, in the early days when I was doing speaking, I always feel like, oh, I can do so much better on that point. Oh, I watched a video and I found I missed that part. I want to add on. The audience did not know. Here's the thing that you need to know. The audience had no idea that you have additional example you want to include in between example 4 and 5, period. And what I found is I constantly receiving really wonderful feedbacks from the audience, says this and that. And I started to look at it and looking at the positive things that people giving me as feedbacks. And I started to look at, sometimes how hard I could be towards myself. And often we forget that it is a gift for us to be able to communicate to a larger audience. And the reason why that they give you their time and energy, you guys can do something else. You can go have dinner already, right? You're sitting here, you're investing your time and energy to our, to our content. And we appreciate that. And so whether or not the audience is giving you feedback, just like Paula said, it's a mirror of you. And a lot of times when people give you positive feedback, also take that. Make sure you honor yourself of the effort you put in. And again, chasing for that perfect solution or perfect speech is great. That's like you're aspiring to hope to be that better you. But also, if you make mistakes, that is when you have low expectation, because I'm expected I'm gonna make a mistake. I'm expected I'm gonna screw up, and that's okay. That's how I learn, and also honor that part as well. So that would be my 2 cents.
I love that, Ying, and adding to that, and also partly addressing what somebody else is asking on the thread now, in terms of how do you showcase confidence, right? And especially when you have an accent and you're not necessarily feeling 100% confident in every single pronunciation or things that you're saying. I think it's some crazy percentage, right? Like something like 80-20 that in terms of verbal communication versus just gestures, your tone of voice, your body language. And so especially when it comes to meetings and like being on Zooms all day and all of those things, it doesn't necessarily have to be just about your pronunciation or your voice, but it can be a lot about your tone and like, are you standing straight? Do you feel confident about what you're gonna say, and are you prepared? And that is actually goes a long, long way on top of just like how you might sound in terms of language.
Beautiful. Love that. Ying, do you have anything to add about this idea of how do you portray confidence and seniority when you're giving a presentation and English is not your native language? and you're giving it in English.
I have a good example. And I just saw in the Q&A session, this also probably answered that question too. How do you bring who you are to the talk, to your work with your unique background? This is so innately relating to what Danielle was asking, is making sure having the understanding of what you do and knowing that you have a unique voice and honoring that, but honoring in a fun way. The way that I look at it, people always say, have fun and get stuff done, right? When you're doing something you enjoy, when you're really kind of, this is something I enjoy. I'm investing my time doing this because I love this topic and I have something to share and I have so much fun doing it. So when you're doing something fun, especially when you started to do your passion project, it is when you're in your higher vibration, right? When you're in high vibe, when you do 3 hours of video editing and you're working on a project, this is me last night. I was doing 3-hour video editing of a emoji related video and it was only 60 seconds, but I spent 3 hours on it because I'm a newbie in video editing and I enjoyed it so much. And your craftsmanship will show. Your passion is going to show it through your work because people can see that. I just shared this with my friend Victoria Taylor in New York right now, and she's about to go to sleep. She said, did someone did it for you? I said, actually, I did it all by myself. And she said, it was so professionally done. I love it. And that's how you, I think, how it shows in your work. In my case, I do a lot of talks and I often pronounce things wrong and people will laugh at me. And I finally came to the realization, I'm gonna call this my Yinglish. I said to myself, if I make a mistake, that's okay. It's my Yinglish because I have to own my mistake. And sometimes I don't even think it's a mistake. I think it's a blessing in disguise because otherwise it's no fun. If everybody like pronouncing perfect English, think about it. If everybody is saying perfect English with no accent whatsoever, how dull is that? That's boring. And you don't want to be one of those people. You want to have a really unique accent. That makes you sexy. That makes you awesome. And that makes you relatable too.
I agree. You're very awesome and relatable. I don't know if I want to comment on the first one. It's kind of weird, but yeah. I think added to that in terms of like, how do you bring yourself and your unique background to your talk and to your work? Something that I ask myself all the time when I'm working on a particular project. Like, for example, when I was working on at Facebook on videos for emerging markets, I constantly ask myself, you know, I was the only like female, like with my background, right? And I asked myself, like, what questions can I ask that only I would be able to ask? And if there was another, like if there was a white guy on my place, it wouldn't be able to, right? Let me think about my own background. And you have to be a little bit introspective about it, about like what makes your voice unique in that particular setting. And for me, it's like, right, I'm an immigrant. I'm from a low-income background. You know, when I was in Peru, I used to go to internet cafes and pay for like an hour of internet to like get dial-up, like very slow, and check, you know, my Hotmail. And so, you know, I had the,
I love that.
It's true. I had those experiences, right? And so what questions can I ask? And so working on videos for emerging markets, I was able to ask, well, what if people are running low on data caps, right? What if they're about to hit their limit and they cannot, watching a video would hit them over and like would make them be late for the bill or something, right? And these are experiences that I've had myself, that I'm able to ask those questions because of those, that normally nobody in the team would ask, because everyone in the team, you know, everyone grew up in affluent places where there's no unlimited internet. And so it takes a little bit of introspection of what is unique that you bring to the table, and then dig deeper in there and see like what you can contribute for the particular project or talk.
I'm gonna give you this emoji, Paula.
Oh, love it.
Waiting for the emoji. Yes. I love
that
it.
one. I got that emoji.
I have one thing to add after Paula mentioned about her experience. It reminded me that, again, sort of this is answering Gabriella's question with your unique background. And I love Paula was talking about, you know, internet cafe and Hotmail. That was so great. I love these little bits and pieces of peeking into your personal life story. And I think that everybody has a very interesting and unique life story. The reason why that I'm so passionate about what I do is I remember back in the days when I was in first year school as an international student in Sydney, Australia. At the time, we have 20 hours we can work for 20 hours. And we're not allowed to work in design jobs because we don't have a degree. So usually when you're a first year student, you don't get the chance to work in a design studio, but you can work in like restaurants. You can work in, a dumpling place, which I did. And I worked in a dumpling place. I worked in a sushi restaurant. I worked in as a bilingual interview and knocking on people's doors and asked them to fill in questionnaires. I did all kinds of different things. I work in a donut shop. I work in an ice cream shop. So all these experiences really enriched my personal experience, and also not only making me a better communicator in this case, because that's how I met all these people from all different countries. And I get the chance to speak to them one by one. I get the chance to also see there was this grandma working in the back, rolling shrimp dumplings every day for like 10 hours. And I was looking at this and thinking, there's no reason why I shouldn't work hard. Somebody is sacrificing their potential to do all these work. Think about it. If they have the opportunity to receive design education like we do, they probably would be a better designer. There's a high chance that they could do better than I do. And so all these sort of personal stories that I was able to have that experience enriched my design experience, because in this case, I will become more empathetic. I would actually become more relatable. And eventually, same thing with the speaking, because you're just communicating to another person, really. You're really just talking. It's like you're talking to a customer. You're talking to, a friend. You're talking to someone you've never met. But that's how we connect with people. And so that's kind of how I look at it. Honor all the experiences, the life experiences you have, and integrate them into the work you do.
That's great. I love that. Thank you both. And I remember in the earlier call too, Paula, you had mentioned the way that you kind of evolved in speaking too, is that you started off maybe telling things that were more focused on just like the content and the thing itself. And one of the ways that you've grown is really realizing that like inserting your own stories in your background can really make the talk. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I thought, why do people want to learn about me? Like before, I would have never shared that story, right, about the internet cafe. I would have been like, why would you care that about my story, about how I grew up in Peru or the things that I used to do? Let me instead just tell you the facts. And the fact of the matter is that anyone can give you the facts, right? But what is the speech? What is the talk? What is the piece of content that I can give you that only I could give you? And this story is uniquely mine, right? And so thinking through those kinds of examples is.
This is so inspiring, Paula. You just remind me of another example that I think will be explaining this. There's so many songs, famous songs. You probably know there's so many wonderful singers in the history, right? But still, every year there's new singers popping up, and they probably sing the same exact song, like the Beatles song. It's the same song, but the singer themselves, in this case, we're speakers, just like singers. We have our individual experience, and the way that we interpret that same song will sound it very differently because of who we are and what experience we have carried the whole time. And I think that we had this chat early on in the morning that I love this quote from Masha McLuhan, who is a fantastic communicator and thinker from Canada. And he said this quote, which is Communication 101, the medium is the message. So in this case, when we are express or when we are convey an idea or a product or a piece of knowledge, these content is a message that we need to convey. But we as speakers ourselves are the medium too, as the medium are the message too. We're a medium, we're the messengers, but we also are the embodiment of how the message is being conveyed to the audience, just like a singer. So if you ever gonna doubt about why would anybody interested in me? It is because you have a unique voice, you have a unique experience that is irreplaceable by anybody else. And so sing that song that you love and sing it with all your heart.
I love that. I want to hear everyone's songs. That's so great. Thank you. Now, there's another question in Q&A about vocabulary and how, we're often told that speeches should be succinct and, that helps make them powerful. And this attendee wants to know, how do you deal with not having enough vocabulary to make that happen? So if instead you end up needing to use a sentence instead of a word to describe something.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily that something needs to be succinct to be powerful. I think usually what, at least for me, when I find different talks powerful is usually because they hit on my emotions, on my feelings, or the content itself was something that I found really valuable. And so when you think back to speeches that you find powerful, think about what makes them powerful to you. And I think very rarely you would say, well, they said it all in 5 minutes, or, that one slide like really hit home and then I was able to, go on about my day. It's usually more about the story that people are crafting and the way that they're delivering it as a whole. And so I would think more about that and less about the particular words, because ultimately, even today, I will rumble and I will forget different words, but that's hopefully okay. Hopefully still my message is being received.
That was wonderful, Paula. I think that I would love to also add is try to use simple language that 80 years grandma or 8-year-old will be able to understand. That's usually how I look at, try to deliver content. And also whether or not this content is powerful, it's not up to me to decide. It's up to my audience to decide. So I won't give myself this high expectation is like, everything I say needs to be really powerful. I can't decide that. The audience is gonna decide whether it's powerful or not. And in terms of succinct, yes, I agree. We need to get to the point. We need to get to the point fast, but often you need to have some sort of illustration to illustrate that point. You can give people all the facts and numbers, and they won't necessarily feel relate. And otherwise, why would you have people doing a whole speech about something? You can just give them a piece of thing and say, here, this is what I want to communicate. It's very succinct, and I hope you feel powerful. That's not gonna work. And the way that I feel is always helpful is have analogy, is have some sort of illustrative examples that can let people feel relatable. Just like the singer example, I kind of just came up on the fly when Paula was talking about it. I was like, oh wow, this would explain, what I'm trying to say, and people will feel relatable because they all know about song, they all know about singer. And so finding those examples that is universal across different language barriers can be very helpful and can be very powerful too.
Fantastic. We have a question from Gabrielle about how do you start growing the trust in your voice and feeling comfortable to share more vulnerably? So I know that you all keep talking about that this is important, but how do you get there? How do you gain that initial, is there maybe a first step that you can recommend to start to ease in and trust your own voice?
That's hard. That's hard because it depends on your personality. Some people are very open as they are in general, in regular life, not necessarily just public speaking. And so perhaps translated that into public speaking will be easier. But personally, I'm a very private person. I'm an introvert. And so being vulnerable in my talks in front of hundreds of people and telling them about my personal life story and mistakes and challenges, it was hard. And the way I approached it was in the same way that I approached opening up for friendships, right? Because at the end, it's almost like a friendship, a conversation between friends that you're having when you're giving a talk. And at the end of the day, you have to make that jump to be vulnerable in friendships in order for the friendship to go deeper. And so in the same way, in a talk, you have to make that jump and just put yourself out there and hope that it be well received by the audience, just so that the content will also translate and be accepted by them. So for me, the main thing would be just practice and ultimately just take that leap of faith and put it all out there and see what happens.
That was great, Paula. I think that this is such a good question. And I just saw in the audience comment, there's also another attendee I was asking, I think with Vanessa, also was talking about, you know, how do I show confidence and seniority that I would have the, you know, ability to share in my native language while speaking English. I think that this is a question that I also ask myself a lot. I'm kind of in between an introvert and an extrovert, because when I'm working on my thing, I can be like, I don't want to talk to anyone, but I also like to communicate with people too. And I feel like we all kind of like that. I feel also more and more, it's easier and easier for me to share personal story when I know that personal story is going to help others. I was just finishing a piece with Danielle and also the team, which we will be publishing it onto the Woman Talk Design, is sharing my very first disastrous story of public speaking back in 2005. I wouldn't necessarily wanted to share that if I didn't know this is going to be helpful for others. I think we always talk about, I think the industry talk about vulnerability. You wanted to get personal, you want to share your personal experience. I look at it as a way of, we don't want to be vulnerable for the sake of being vulnerable. We want to be relatable so that people can get value from our personal story. And that's how I make a decision when and how I'm going to share my story. So I hope that helps.
It's great. I really love the idea of giving back to others, right? And doing it for, you mentioned earlier, your audience and the people that are there to listen to you. Michelle wants to know how to overcome the fear of Q&A, which I know a lot of people are afraid of Q&A regardless of whether or not they're a bilingual speaker, but specifically with the audience having language challenges. So, you know, maybe if they have a hard time understanding you or you have a hard time understanding them, how do you overcome the fear of Q&A?
For me, I'd say that on the one hand, not being afraid to asking them to repeat the question or to rephrase the question if I felt like I didn't understand it. And then in terms of giving an answer, being okay with saying, I don't know. If for some reason you have, you know, a brain fart and your brain is full of English and Spanish or English and whatever other language you have, and you just can't put it together, just be honest and say, you know, I'll get back to you on that one, or I currently can't answer that question, but I'll get back to you on that. In terms of the fear itself, I think it's completely normal to be fearsome of those things. If you work for a big company, for example, at Facebook, there's a lot of rules and guidelines that go around it in terms of answering Q&As on behalf of, you know, your representative of the company. And so if you work for a big company, you might have that added pressure of whatever you're saying might end up on TechCrunch tomorrow, right? If you say the wrong thing. And I think that those fears are definitely there regardless, but just not being afraid to saying, I cannot answer this, or I don't know. I think knowing that there's that backup option and there's an out and you don't have to try and answer everything, it can put your nerves at ease a little bit there.
I love everything Paula said. I would like to also add that for me personally, I love Q&A. I really do. I tell you why. I love Q&A because number one, it really exhibits that people listened. They listen to you, and that's why they have questions. If they don't listen to you, they won't even bother to ask you questions. So the fact that people bother to ask questions, that's awesome. That's already like, yes, I've done something right. That's also another point is celebrate small wins. You know, when you're doing speaking for the first time, celebrating small wins is super important. Like small things like people bother to ask you questions, that's awesome. So in terms of like, how to overcome fear of Q&A. In my case, I think that, sure, we do sometimes afraid that we will say something not accurate, or, sometimes we probably don't have the right answer right in the moment. In my case, every time people ask me question, I put my attention and intention in a Q&A. That is, I put my attention to that person who's asking me, because they genuinely want me to communicate a piece of information that's going to be useful to them. So my intention is, I want to make sure that it's worth your time to ask that question. I want to make sure that whatever I'm going to say after I look at your question or listen to your question, it's going to add value to you. So once you have that, two things, attention and intention, I think you will have good answer come out of you. It will come out just like this. It will flow very naturally because you have the best intention. That's going to give you the energy to let out the content.
Great, thank you both. And we are going to make this our last question. This is from Vanessa. I think it's a good one that sums things up as well. She wants to know about what advice you'd share for someone who is about to embark on their first speaking experience, or maybe just in communicating in general. So maybe you can think back to all of the things that you learned. You shared so much great advice already, but what do you want to leave people with of, what advice that you'd shared, maybe that you learned along the way or that someone shared with you?
I think that there's a lot to learn along the way, regardless, even if you were to, listen to all the talks about how to do public speaking and read all the books. Ultimately, you're just going to have to do it at some point. And that's how you're going to learn, and you're going to keep evolving and iterating on your own style. So I think the main thing that I would tell myself, for if it was my first public speaking engagement, I would tell anybody else, it's to just be compassionate towards yourself and towards the learning process and the mistakes that you might make, and the challenges that you're going to go through, and be compassionate towards that learning experience, and have that growth mindset that, as with anything else, you're just going to have to jump and then slowly build up and grow from it. But there's not going to be a time where you're going to feel 100% ready and 100% an expert before you take that first step. So at some point, you just have to do it.
That's great. I think I would love to start with my lovely speaking coach, Cliff Kennedy's 10 very simple tips. I always love sharing it with others. Before you go to speak, if you're doing your first speaking gig or however many speaking gig, this is always the 10 points that I remind myself with too. Is number 1, remember your purpose. Number 2, visualize success. Number 3, embrace your audience. Just like what Paula said, have compassion to your audience. And number 4, review your conclusion, because it's going to be very helpful. You want to have a very strong start and have a very strong finish. And number 5, know what to say first. Again, have a very strong start, very strong finish. Number 6, that's applying to when you're speaking in person, publicly, offline, which is balance your stance. But in my case right now, we're doing this online speaking, and I'm sitting in my chair really comfortable. So find the comfort pose that you wanted to stick with. Number 7, that is set your tempo. So the speed that you deliver, it's also very important to give white space. It's like when you do design work, we all appreciate space, right? So give some space when you're speaking. Slow down sometimes if you need it to. Number 8, focus on the present, because the present is a present. Number 9 is smile. And number 10 is be thankful. So these are the 10 points from my speaking coach, Cliff. But in my case, I would love to add on the 11, which is have fun. This is the time for you to shine, have fun, and celebrate. This is the first time you're going to speak into a larger audience, and that's amazing. So make sure, have fun. Always have a lot of fun when you're doing it.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. This was so fantastic. We'd love to hear from you in the chat. I know that we can't hear kind of your thanks and your clapping on our webinar, but would love to have you share your thanks with Paula and Ying in the chat. We are so glad that you all came and participated. You had some great questions. And I want to thank Paula and Ying so much for just being such amazing role models and being willing to share with us your experience and your advice. Also, additional bonus that they did not plan this, but they're matching today, which I've loved. But that's just a small little tidbit in all of the wonderful things that came from today. So thank you all for being here. When you close out of this, you'll be prompted to fill out a feedback survey. We'd love to hear from you on your experience in this Couch Convo. I'll also drop it in here as well. And we hope to see you at more Women Talk Design events in the future. We'll follow up after this event and send a recording of this in case you want to watch it again. And also Ying's post that she was talking about her experience with failure and what she learned from it. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening and share your stories. Speak up.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.